My name is Winfred. For 34 years, I believed I understood what family meant. I thought loyalty was something permanent, something you were born into, something that didn't disappear just because life became inconvenient. I was wrong, and it took one sound, a single slap across my 7-year-old daughter's face, to destroy everything I thought I knew. But if I tell you only about that moment, you'll think this story is about a wedding. It isn't. It's about betrayal. It's about stolen money. And it's about discovering that the people who smile beside you in family, photographs sometimes, spend years quietly taking pieces of your life while convincing you it's love. 3 days after my sister's wedding, I opened a folder of bank statements and uncovered a secret that would destroy what remained of my family. None of them saw it coming, especially my sister. My daughter Renly had already survived more than most adults ever would. She was only 7 years old. The year before the wedding, doctors finally diagnosed her with a rare autoimmune disease after months of unanswered questions. Some mornings she'd wake up unable to bend her knees. Other mornings she'd cry because her fingers hurt too much to hold a pencil. Then, just when we thought she was getting better, the exhaustion would hit without warning. She could be laughing at breakfast and barely able to keep her eyes open before lunch. Watching your child fight a body that refuses to cooperate changes you. You stop making long-term plans. You stop assuming tomorrow will be easy. You become grateful for ordinary days. I worked as a senior accountant for a regional manufacturing company. Numbers made sense. Illness didn't. After Renly's diagnosis, I gave up every overtime shift I could. The promotions stopped. The raises slowed down. I didn't care. No paycheck was worth missing another specialist appointment. Insurance covered some treatments. Not enough. Every month there was another medication, another scan, another specialist who wasn't considered in-network. So I started building something, a separate savings account. I never called it a savings account in my mind. I called it Renly's future. Every bonus, every tax refund, every extra dollar, it went there. If she ever needed another surgery, another hospital stay, another experimental treatment, she would have it. No waiting, no borrowing, no choosing between medicine and groceries. No child should ever hear the words, "We can't afford it." Especially not mine. Nobody knew exactly how much money was in that account. I never talked about it. There was no reason to. It existed for one purpose, to protect my daughter. Looking back now, I should have protected it better. My younger sister, Kinsley, had always lived differently. She could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with everyone's phone number. People remembered her. They wanted to be around her. Teachers loved her. Neighbors adored her. Even cashiers somehow ended up telling her their life stories. She had that kind of personality. I didn't. I was quieter. The dependable daughter. The one who remembered anniversaries. The one who drove our parents to doctor's appointments. The one everyone called whenever something needed fixing. If Kinsley was sunshine, I was the foundation nobody noticed until it cracked. For years, I convinced myself I preferred it that way. Maybe I really did. Or maybe I'd simply accepted that there wasn't enough room in our family for two daughters who needed attention. Our parents certainly didn't encourage competition. Kinsley just has a bigger personality. My mother would say whenever someone complimented my sister, "You're the responsible one." It sounded like praise. It wasn't. It was an assignment, one I carried for decades. When Kinsley got engaged to Holt, everyone acted like royalty had announced a wedding. Family group chats exploded. Pinterest boards multiplied. Weekend planning meetings became mandatory. My mother practically moved into bridal mode overnight. "The wedding has to be perfect," she kept saying. "It only happens once." I smiled, helped address invitations, picked up decorations, compared catering quotes, because that's what responsible daughters did. Meanwhile, Renly was finally getting stronger. Her medications were working. She wasn't cured. There was no cure. But for the first time in almost a year, she looked like herself again. She laughed louder. She slept through the night. She started asking if she could ride her bike again. Every tiny improvement felt like winning the lottery. When Kinsley asked her to be the flower girl, Renly nearly screamed with excitement. "Really?" She looked at me with those enormous hazel eyes. "Mom, really?" Kinsley laughed. "Of course. You're my favorite niece." She only had one niece, but Renly didn't notice. She threw her arms around Kinsley's waist. "I promise I'll do a perfect job." I watched them together and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maybe our family really was healing. Maybe after such a difficult year, we all deserved something joyful. Wedding preparations consumed the next 6 months. Every conversation somehow circled back to centerpieces, guest lists, flowers, music, budgets, especially budgets. They're a little tight right now. My mother mentioned casually one afternoon while we folded invitation cards. Weddings are so expensive. I nodded sympathetically. They'll figure it out. They will. She hesitated, then changed the subject. Looking back, that tiny pause should have meant something. Instead, I ignored it. Life was already full enough. Renly still had monthly appointments. Blood work every 6 weeks. Physical therapy twice a month. My calendar looked like a medical secretary's. I didn't have energy left to question wedding finances. Or anything else. Then little requests started appearing. Kinsley forgot her credit card. Can you pay for lunch? She'll send it tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week, then disappeared. A florist needed a deposit. A rental company needed another payment. A temporary transfer, Kinsley promised. I'll pay you back. She usually did. Sometimes late. Always with a smile. Always with a joke that somehow made me feel guilty for caring. You know I'd never take advantage of you. I believed her, because she was my sister. The wedding took place at a vineyard nearly 2 hours outside town. Early autumn. Golden leaves. Perfect weather. The kind photographers dream about. Renly had been awake since 6 that morning. She insisted on putting on her flower girl dress herself. White shoes, tiny pearl headband, little satin basket. She twirled in front of the mirror. Do I look beautiful? You look perfect. No. She grinned. I look like a princess. You do. She laughed so hard she almost dropped the basket. For a few precious seconds. She wasn't a child with a chronic illness. She was simply 7 years old. Exactly as it should have been. The ceremony itself went beautifully. Renly scattered flower petals carefully down the aisle. Every step deliberate. Every smile genuine. Guests whispered about how adorable she looked. My heart felt lighter than it had in months. Maybe we'd finally reach the other side. Maybe life was becoming normal again. I couldn't have been more wrong. The reception hadn't started yet. The photographer wanted every possible combination before guests. Wandered toward the cocktail tables. Parents, grandparents, siblings, bridesmaids, groomsmen, then everyone together. By the 4th round of family portraits, even the adults were getting tired. Renly had been standing in dress shoes for nearly 90 minutes. She never complained. Not once. That was one of the hardest parts about her illness. She'd learned far too young that adults already worried enough. So she hid the pain whenever she could. Only I recognized the signs. The tiny shift from one foot to the other. The way she flexed her fingers when her joints stiffened. The slight stiffness in her smile. I walked over and crouched beside her. You okay, sweetheart? She nodded immediately. I'm fine. You sure? Another nod. I don't want Aunt Kinsley to think I'm not helping. My heart squeezed. You've already helped. But there are more pictures. We can take a break. She shook her head. No. She looked toward the photographer. I can do it. She wanted so badly to make everyone proud. I kissed the top of her head. Tell me the second you need to sit down. I will. She smiled. She lied. The photographer gathered everyone on the stone staircase overlooking the vineyard. Rows of people. Children in front. Parents behind them. Bridal party on both sides. Perfect, the photographer called. Everyone look right here. She snapped several photos. Beautiful. Another? Now everyone laugh. The group laughed. Another picture. One more. The photographer adjusted her camera. Flower girl, chin up just a little. Renly tried. I watched her knees tremble. Just once, then again. I knew that look. I'd seen it in hospital hallways. I'd seen it outside physical therapy. I'd seen it in grocery stores when she'd pushed herself, too far pretending everything was normal. I started stepping toward her. Too late, her legs simply stopped cooperating. She didn't faint. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse dramatically. She just sat down, right there on the stone steps. The flower basket slipped from her hands. Rose petals scattered across the staircase. The photographer lowered her camera. Oh! One bridesmaid stepped aside. Someone whispered, Is she okay? I was already moving. Then I heard Kinsley's voice. What are you doing? Every conversation stopped. Kinsley marched down 2 steps, her wedding dress gathered in one hand. She wasn't looking at Renly. She was looking at the photographer. At the interrupted picture. At the guests watching. My God. She threw both hands into the air. We were almost done. Renly looked up. I'm sorry. You've been slowing everything down all day." The vineyard became completely silent. I expected Kinsley to catch herself, to realize she was talking to a child. Instead, she grabbed Renly by the upper arm, hard enough that my daughter gasped. "Stand up," Renly tried. Her knees buckled again. "I can't." "Yes, you can." "I can't." Then Kinsley slapped her. The sound wasn't loud. It didn't echo. But somehow, it cut through 200 conversations at once. A sharp crack, followed by absolute silence. The flower petals drifted across the stone steps. My daughter stared at her aunt. She didn't even cry immediately. She looked confused, as if her brain couldn't understand what had just happened. Then her lower lip trembled, and tears filled her eyes. Something inside me broke. I don't remember crossing the distance. 1 second I was near the back row. The next, I was kneeling in front of Renly. I took her face gently in my hands. A red mark was already appearing across her cheek. My hands shook. Not from fear, from rage. "Sweetheart," I whispered. "Look at me." She finally burst into tears. "I'm sorry, Mommy." Those 4 words nearly destroyed me. She thought she'd done something wrong. I wrapped my arms around her. "You have nothing to apologize for." Nothing, absolutely nothing. Behind me, I heard Kinsley exhale dramatically. I barely touched her. I stood slowly. For the first time in my life, I looked at my sister like she was a stranger. "You hit my daughter." Kinsley rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't start. She's 7. She ruined every single picture. My daughter couldn't stand." She sat down in the middle of the formal portraits. "Because she's sick. She's always sick." The words landed like another slap. Several guests exchanged horrified looks. Someone near the back quietly muttered, "What the hell?" Kinsley ignored them. "Do you know how much these photographs cost?" I stared at her. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't horrified by what she'd done. She was angry at being interrupted. Then my mother hurried between us. "Girls," she forced a smile, "let's calm down." I looked at her. "Did you just see what happened? Winfred?" "No." I pointed toward Renly. "Did you see her hit my daughter?" My mother's eyes flickered toward the photographer, toward the guests, toward Kinsley's white dress, anywhere except the little girl crying beside me. It was a stressful morning. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Stress doesn't make someone slap a child. Kinsley didn't mean. I absolutely meant to correct her. Kinsley interrupted. "I wasn't going to let her ruin my wedding." I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because my brain refused to accept reality. My father finally stepped forward. "Let's finish the photographs." I turned toward him slowly. "What?" "We'll discuss this later." Later. Not now. Not while my daughter stood crying beside me. Not while the woman who hit her was still defending herself. Later. My mother touched my arm. "Winfred," her voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Please. Not today. You're upsetting everyone." I looked around. Guests were frozen. The photographer hadn't lifted her camera again. The musicians had stopped talking. Even the children were silent. Then my mother said the sentence I would never forgive. "Just apologize for Renly disrupting the photographs." For a second, I honestly wondered if I'd heard her correctly. "Apologize," I repeated quietly. "Yes, so we can move on." I looked down at my daughter. She was clutching my hand with both of hers. Still crying, still believing she'd done something wrong. That's when every ounce of guilt I'd carried my entire life disappeared. No more keeping the peace. No more being the responsible daughter. No more making myself smaller so everyone else could stay comfortable. I bent down and lifted Renly into my arms. She wrapped her arms around my neck. I looked directly at my mother, then at my father, finally at Kinsley. Absolutely not. No shouting. No scene. Just those 2 words. I turned around and walked away from my family. I never looked back. The drive home was almost completely silent. Renly cried for the first 15 minutes. Not loudly, just quiet little sobs that broke my heart every time I heard them. I reached across the center console and held her hand whenever traffic slowed. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "For what?" "I messed up Aunt Kinsley's pictures." "No." My voice came out firmer than I intended. "You got tired." "I couldn't stand." "I know. I tried." "I know. I wanted her to be happy. My throat tightened. Sweetheart. I pulled into a quiet parking lot and turned off the engine. Then I climbed into the backseat beside her. I gently brushed the hair away from her face. The outline of Kinsley's hand was still faintly visible. Not enough to leave a bruise, more than enough to leave a memory. You listen to me. She looked at me with tear-filled eyes. You did absolutely nothing wrong. But she was mad. She was wrong. Did I ruin the wedding? No. Are you sure? I'm completely sure. She stared at me for several seconds. Children always know when adults are pretending. Finally, she nodded. Then she leaned into my shoulder. I'm tired. I know. She fell asleep before we reached home. I carried her inside without waking her. She was getting heavier now that she was growing. But in that moment, I barely felt her weight. I tucked her into bed, still wearing her flower girl dress. She looked so small, so peaceful. Nothing about her sleeping face matched the chaos she'd left behind. I sat beside her until I was sure she was truly asleep. Only then did I walk downstairs. My phone buzzed again. Missed call. Another one. Then another. I finally looked. Mother. Kinsley. Dad. Kinsley. Unknown number. Karen. Mom. 12 missed calls. 3 voicemails. Almost 30 text messages. I opened the first one. Mom. Please answer. The second. Kinsley. I can't believe you embarrassed me like that. The third. Dad. Let's talk when you've calmed down. Calmed down. I stared at those words. My daughter had just been slapped across the face. Apparently, I was the one who needed calming down. I put the phone face down on the kitchen table. I wasn't ready. The next morning, I made pancakes. Saturday mornings were our tradition. No matter how busy life became, we always made pancakes. Renly sat quietly at the table. Usually, she talked nonstop. About school, books, whatever cartoon she'd watched. That morning, she barely spoke. Halfway through breakfast, she asked, Mom? Yeah? Is Aunt Kinsley mad at me forever? The question hit me harder than the slap itself. Because children always assume adults' anger must somehow be their fault. I reached across the table. No. Then why did she hit me? There it was. The question every parent dreads. How do you explain cruelty without teaching your child that the world is full of cruel people? I chose the truth. Sometimes adults make terrible choices. Even adults we love. Even family. She shouldn't have done that. No. Will she say sorry? I paused. I don't know. She nodded slowly. I don't think she likes me anymore. I got up immediately. Walked around the table. Knelt beside her chair. Oh, sweetheart. This isn't because of you. She looked unconvinced. I hugged her tightly. I promise you something. What? No one? I kissed the top of her head. Gets to hurt you and then blame you for it. No one. Around 11 that morning, someone knocked on my front door. I already knew who it was. My mother never texted before showing up. She believed family didn't need appointments. I opened the door. She stood there carrying a blueberry pie. Like this was a normal Sunday visit. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She placed the pie on my kitchen counter. I baked your favorite. Neither of us mentioned it. Instead, she folded her hands together. Winfred, I'm here because this has gone far enough. I waited. Kinsley cried all night. I blinked. Did she? She feels terrible. Interesting. What does that mean? It means she never apologized. My mother sighed. She was emotional. So was my daughter. That's different. I looked at her. How? Kinsley was under tremendous pressure. So that's an excuse to hit a child? I didn't say that. No. You just keep explaining why she did it. My mother rubbed her forehead. You know your sister? I thought I did. Silence. Finally, she said it. The guests were talking. I laughed once. A humorless sound. Of course they were. You walking out created such a scene. I stared at her. Slowly, carefully. My daughter was slapped. Yes, but... No. I held up my hand. There is no but. She shifted uncomfortably. You embarrassed your sister. No. I refused to let my daughter be humiliated. There's a difference. For the first time, my mother's patience cracked. You always do this. What? You make everything bigger than it has to be. I actually looked behind me, as if maybe she was talking to someone else. My 7-year-old daughter was assaulted. I wouldn't use that word. I would. It was one slap. My heart went cold. One slap, as though there was an acceptable number. "Mom!" I spoke very quietly. "If someone hit me when I was 7, would you have told me to apologize?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "Would you?" Still nothing. "So why are you asking it of my daughter?" She looked away. "Families forgive." I nodded slowly. "After accountability, not instead of it." Kinsley didn't mean, "I don't care what she meant." "I care what she did." Another long silence filled the kitchen. Then my mother tried one last time. "Just call her." "No." "Let her explain." "No. She deserves that." I met her eyes. "My daughter deserves safety." "You chose the wrong person yesterday." Her face fell. "I chose my family." "No. You chose appearances. And there's a difference." She picked up her purse. "I don't recognize you anymore." The word surprised me, because for the first time in years, I didn't recognize myself either. Not the quiet daughter, not the peacekeeper, not the woman who apologized simply because it was easier. Maybe that version of me had stayed behind on those vineyard steps. And maybe that wasn't a loss. As my mother reached the front door, she stopped without turning around. "Your father thinks you'll come around," I answered honestly. "He doesn't know me anymore." She left without another word. I locked the door, then leaned against it. I had no idea that within 48 hours, something far worse than the wedding would come to light. Something hidden in plain sight. Something buried inside my own bank account. For 2 days, I heard almost nothing from Kinsley. That alone was unusual. Normally, she couldn't tolerate being ignored for more than a few hours. Instead, the messages came from everyone else. My father left short voicemails asking me to be reasonable. My Aunt Karen texted twice, saying she hoped the family could heal. Even 2 cousins reached out, both carefully avoiding any mention of the slap itself. It amazed me how quickly adults could edit a story. Within 48 hours, my daughter's tears had become an unfortunate misunderstanding. The slap had become an emotional moment, and somehow, I had become the difficult one. I stopped answering entirely. My attention belonged somewhere else. Renly had a follow-up appointment on Tuesday. Her blood work looked encouraging. Inflammation markers were lower than they'd been in months. Her rheumatologist smiled. "She's doing really well." For the first time in over a year, I allowed myself to breathe. As we walked back to the parking lot, Renly slipped her small hand into mine. "Can we get ice cream?" "You just had blood drawn." She nodded seriously. "I think I deserve chocolate." I laughed. "I think you might." For one wonderful hour, the wedding disappeared. We shared mint chocolate chip ice cream on a park bench. She chased pigeons, laughed until she hiccuped. I watched her running across the grass and silently thanked every doctor who had helped bring us to this point. Then I went home, opened my laptop, and everything changed. The specialist's invoice had arrived by email, just over $1,200. Insurance covered part of it. The remainder would come from the account I'd built for emergencies. Routine. I'd done this dozens of times. I logged into my credit union, entered my password, opened the account. Something felt wrong immediately. The balance looked lower. Not by a few dollars, by thousands. I frowned. Maybe I'd clicked the wrong account. I checked again. No, this was Renly's medical account. I stared at the number, then opened the transaction history. One transfer, $3,000. Another, $2,200. Another, $3,200. My stomach tightened. I hadn't authorized any of them. I knew I hadn't. I remembered every payment I'd ever made from that account. Hospitals, pharmacies, specialists, physical therapy. Nothing else. I refreshed the page. Same numbers, same transfers, same dates. 4 months earlier, then 3 months, then 6 weeks before the wedding. I whispered aloud. "What?" I called the credit union immediately. After verifying my identity, the representative pulled up the account. "Is there a problem with the transfers?" she asked. "I didn't make them." She became very professional. "Give me just a moment." Keyboard clicks. Silence. More typing. Finally, I can see the transfers. So they were fraudulent? I can't determine that. They appear to have been authorized by an approved user. My heartbeat slowed. Approved user? What approved user? The secondary authorized individual. I froze. Months earlier, during the worst of Renly's treatments, my mother had offered to help. "You have too much on your plate. If I can pay a few utility bills while you're at appointments, It'll make things easier. I remembered sitting inside the hospital cafeteria, barely sleeping, barely thinking, signing paperwork without reading every line. I hadn't added her to Renly's protected account. I'd added her to my everyday household account. Or at least, I thought I had. Who authorized the transfers? I asked. The representative read the name. Bernadette Harlow. My mother. My own mother. I sat perfectly still after the call ended. Not crying, not angry, just empty. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe she'd moved money temporarily. Maybe she'd forgotten to tell me. I opened every monthly statement. January, February, March, April, May. One by one, the transfers were there, hidden among ordinary payments. Electricity, groceries, gasoline, internet. 3 withdrawals, each just small enough that I hadn't questioned the monthly balance. Not while juggling medications. Not while living from appointment to appointment. I opened another window, cross-referenced every transfer date with my calendar. The first transfer, the week Kinsley booked the vineyard. The second, right after she'd complained about the florist demanding another deposit. The third, less than 2 weeks before the wedding. My pulse started pounding. No, surely not. I opened my spreadsheet software. If 11 years in accounting had taught me anything, it was this. When emotions get loud, numbers stay honest. I built a timeline. Every withdrawal, every date, every amount. Then I totaled them. $8,400. Enough to cover almost a year of specialist visits. Enough to pay for medication if insurance stopped cooperating. Enough to save my daughter during another flare. Gone. I still wasn't ready to accuse anyone. Not yet. I needed proof. Real proof. Not suspicion. So I called the bank again. This time, I requested copies of every authorization connected to those transfers. The representative explained they could provide electronic records showing exactly which authorized user had initiated each transaction. It may take a day or two. I'll wait. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair. My phone buzzed. Kinsley. For the first time since the wedding. Kinsley, are you done punishing everyone yet? I stared at the message. Another one arrived seconds later. Mom's been crying because of you. Not because she'd stolen from me. Not because my daughter had been hit. Because of me, a third message appeared. This family used to stick together. I almost replied. Instead, I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen. $8,400. Missing. No. This wasn't about the wedding anymore. This was about something much bigger, much uglier. I closed the messaging app without answering. If the numbers proved what I was beginning to suspect, no argument over text messages would matter. Not after this. The following afternoon, the bank emailed the authorization records. I downloaded the file, opened the first page, then the second. By the time I reached the last document, there was no longer any room for doubt. Every transfer, every authorization, every electronic signature, my mother's credentials, my mother's approval, and one destination account number. I copied it into another browser window. It belonged to Kinsley. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I quietly said 4 words to the empty room. They stole from her. Not from me, from Renly. And in that moment, I stopped wondering whether my family would tell the truth. Instead, I started planning how I was going to make sure they couldn't avoid it. For years, I had built my career around one simple rule. People lie, numbers don't. That was why I loved accounting. A spreadsheet didn't care who was popular. A bank statement didn't care who cried the loudest. Every dollar left a trail. If you knew where to look, and now, I knew exactly where to look. The bank sent everything I requested. Authorization logs, transfer confirmations, electronic signatures, IP records, timestamps. I spread the papers across my dining room table exactly the way I would have for a client preparing for court. No assumptions. No emotions, just facts. The first transfer, $3,000. Authorized by my mother, destination account. Kinsley Harlow, the second, $2,200. Same authorization. Same destination. The third, $3,200. Again, my mother's authorization, my sister's account. There was no missing piece anymore. No misunderstanding, no banking error. My mother had taken money meant for my daughter's medical care and quietly transferred it to my sister, 3 separate times. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was crying. I wasn't. The tears had stopped somewhere back at the vineyard. Instead, I kept remembering every conversation we'd had over the previous 6 months. Every little request, every moment that suddenly looked different. We're just waiting for money to clear. The florist needs another payment. The venue requires another deposit. I'll pay everyone back. She had, just not with her own money. Mine, or rather, Renly's. The realization made me physically sick. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. For years, I'd worried about being too suspicious, too cautious, too guarded. Now I understood something. Trust without boundaries isn't kindness. It's vulnerability. And someone had decided to exploit mine. The next morning, I called the vineyard. Not because of the money, because of the photographs. If this ever became more than a family argument, I wanted documentation. The wedding coordinator answered after the second ring. This is Melissa. I introduced myself. I'm wondering if it's possible to purchase the unedited photographs from the wedding last Saturday. There was a short pause. Oh! Her tone changed immediately. I remember. I'm sorry you and your daughter experienced that. The simple acknowledgement nearly caught me off guard. Thank you. We still have everything. I'd like copies. Of course. Then she hesitated. I should probably tell you something. My heartbeat quickened. What is it? Your sister called us 2 days ago. I said nothing. She wanted the original files deleted. What? She said she didn't want any awkward photographs circulating. I closed my eyes. Did you delete them? No. Her voice became firmer. Our contracts require us to keep all originals. Nothing has been removed. Relief washed over me. Thank you. I honestly wasn't comfortable with the request. Neither was I, because only someone worried about evidence asks for evidence to disappear. That afternoon, another unexpected phone call arrived. This time, from Holt, my brother-in-law, or whatever he still was. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Hello? Winfred? His voice sounded tired. Yeah. I wanted to ask you something. I waited. When Kinsley said Renly had been acting up all day, was that true? The question surprised me. You really want the answer? I do. No. Silence. She stood for almost 2 hours. She never complained. She has an autoimmune disease. I know. No, I said quietly. I don't think you do. He didn't interrupt. There are days she can't even open a water bottle. There are mornings when getting dressed hurts. Standing in dress shoes for that long, I honestly don't know how she managed it. Another long silence. Finally he spoke. Kinsley told me she exaggerated her illness for attention. I actually laughed. A bitter, exhausted laugh. Did she also tell you about the hospital admissions? No. The steroid treatments? No. The physical therapy? No. I figured. His breathing became heavier. I've seen the comments online. What comments? You haven't looked? I've been busy. Someone had apparently shared a vague account of the wedding in a local community group. No names. Just enough details that guests immediately recognized the event. Apparently, people weren't defending Kinsley. Quite the opposite. She keeps arguing with strangers. Holt sounded defeated. They're asking why she hit a little girl. What does she say? That Renly ruined the wedding. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. Before hanging up, Holt asked one final question. Can I ask you something else? Go ahead. Did your parents really ask you to apologize? Yes. For your daughter? Yes. He was quiet for several seconds. Then he whispered something almost to himself. I don't think I married the person I thought I did. The call ended. I sat there staring at the phone. Maybe, for the first time, someone else was finally seeing what I'd seen. By Friday evening, I had assembled everything into one thick folder. Bank statements, authorization records, transfer confirmations, printed screenshots, a complete timeline, even copies of the vineyard, coordinator's email confirming that the original wedding photographs still existed. I slid the final page into a clear plastic sleeve, closed the folder, and placed it on my kitchen table. Then I called my parents. We need to meet. My father sounded relieved. Finally. Sunday. Our house? Yes. Will Kinsley be there? She will. Good. There was something in my voice that made him hesitate. What is this about? I looked at the folder, at the evidence, at $8,400 that had disappeared from my daughter's future. Then I answered with complete honesty. The truth. He was silent. For the first time since the wedding, my father sounded nervous. He had no idea what was waiting inside that folder. Neither did my mother. And Kinsley never imagined her honeymoon would end with every lie she'd told laid out in black ink across my parents' dining room table. Sunday afternoon arrived gray and unusually cold. The weather matched exactly how I felt. I dressed simply. No makeup, no jewelry except my wedding ring, though these days, I sometimes caught myself twisting it around my finger whenever life became overwhelming. Before leaving, I knelt beside Renly. She was coloring dragons at the kitchen table. I'm going to Grandma's for a little while. She looked up. Is Aunt Kinsley going to be there? Yes. Her smile disappeared. Do I have to come? The question hurt more than she realized. No. You don't ever have to be around someone who makes you feel unsafe. She nodded with obvious relief. My neighbor, Mrs. Collins, agreed to stay with her for the afternoon. As I walked toward my car, Renly ran outside. She hugged me tightly. I love you, Mommy. I love you more, she whispered. Don't let them be mean to you. I kissed her forehead. I won't. For the first time in my life. I actually believed that. My parents' dining room looked exactly as it always had. The same oak table, the same china cabinet, the same family photographs covering one wall. Pictures of birthdays, Christmas mornings, graduations. One photograph caught my attention. Kinsley and me. I was about 12. She was 9. Our arms wrapped around each other, both smiling. I wondered whether either little girl in that picture would recognize the women we'd become. You made it. My father stood awkwardly in the doorway. He looked exhausted, older than I remembered only a week earlier. Inside the dining room sat my mother, Kinsley, and Holt. Nobody smiled. Nobody hugged me. Nobody even offered coffee. That alone told me everyone understood this wasn't a reconciliation. I placed the thick folder on the table. No one spoke. My mother broke the silence first. I hope we can finally move past all this. I looked at her calmly. I hope so too. Kinsley folded her arms. You've dragged this out long enough. I almost smiled. You'll think differently in about 5 minutes. She frowned. What does that mean? Instead of answering, I opened the folder, removed the first page, and slid it across the table. My mother glanced down, then immediately looked away. What is this? A bank statement. I don't understand. You will. I placed the second document beside it. Then the third. Then the authorization records. One after another. No speeches. No accusations. Just paper. The room became quieter with every page. Finally, Holt reached forward. He picked up the first authorization. Read it. Then the second. His eyebrows slowly pulled together. What account is this? I answered. My daughter's medical fund. Silence. Holt looked at Kinsley. Then back at me. And these transfers went into your wife's account. He stared at the paperwork. No. His voice barely came out. Kinsley? She shifted uncomfortably. It's not what it looks like. I finally spoke. It looks like $8,400 meant for my daughter's medical care was transferred into your account. Nobody answered. So please. I folded my hands. Tell me what it actually is. My mother suddenly leaned forward. I can explain. I'd love that. Her breathing became uneven. Kinsley was under tremendous financial pressure. I blinked. Interesting. She'd already signed contracts. The vendors wanted deposits. The venue? I interrupted quietly. So you stole from your granddaughter. I borrowed it. My mother's voice cracked. I was going to replace it. When? She hesitated. I don't know. Before or after another hospital admission? She looked down. No answer. My father still hadn't spoken. He simply stared into his coffee. Dad. He looked up slowly. Did you know? His shoulders dropped. A tiny movement, almost invisible, but enough. I asked you a question. Yes? One word, barely audible. My entire body went cold. You knew. He nodded. I thought... His voice shook. I thought you'd never notice. The sentence echoed through the room. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. You thought I wouldn't notice that thousands of dollars disappeared from the account. Keeping my daughter alive? It wasn't like that. Then tell me, what was it like? He couldn't. Because there wasn't another version. Only the truth. Holt stood up. Slowly, almost mechanically. "Kinsley." She looked at him. "You knew where the money came from?" She didn't answer. "Kinsley." Still nothing. He asked again. "Were you aware?" Finally, very quietly, she nodded. My father closed his eyes. My mother began crying. I simply watched. Because I wanted every person in that room to sit with the truth without me rescuing them from it. Holt looked physically ill. "You told me your parents were helping." "They were. Not like this." She wiped tears from her face. "We were going to pay it back." "When?" "I don't know. Before or after your niece needed another treatment." Kinsley burst into tears. "It wasn't supposed to become this." "No?" I asked. "What exactly was it supposed to become?" She had no answer. Then I placed one final document on the table, the email from the vineyard. Holt picked it up. His expression changed immediately. "What is this?" "The wedding coordinator." He read silently. Then aloud, "Your sister contacted us requesting deletion of the original time-stamped photographs. We declined in accordance with our record retention policy." He slowly lowered the page. "Kinsley?" She froze. "You tried to have the photographs deleted?" "I didn't want people seeing..." "Seeing what?" I asked. "The truth?" "No. You wanted the only evidence of what happened to disappear." I was embarrassed. I looked directly into her eyes. "You should be." The room fell completely silent. No one defended her this time. No one asked me to calm down. No one suggested we move on. Because there was nothing left to hide. Every lie, every transfer, every decision was sitting in plain sight on my parents' dining room table. And then Holt quietly said the one sentence none of them expected. "I think we need to leave." Not we. Not all of us. He was looking only at Kinsley. She stared at him in disbelief. "Holt, we're leaving." His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes just before someone's entire understanding of another person collapses. As Kinsley slowly stood, still crying, she looked at me one last time. "You've destroyed this family." I met her gaze without flinching. "No," I said quietly. "I just stopped protecting the lie." Nobody moved for several seconds. The silence after my last sentence was heavier than any argument. Kinsley looked around the room as though she expected someone to defend her. For most of her life, someone always had. My mother, my father, sometimes me, not anymore. Holt picked up his car keys from the table. "We're leaving." Kinsley grabbed his wrist. "Please don't do this here." "I'm not doing anything." He gently pulled his hand away. "You did." She looked desperately toward my parents. "Mom!" My mother wiped tears from her cheeks. "Holt, I think everyone needs to calm down." He turned toward her. "Calm down?" His voice wasn't loud. If anything, it had become frighteningly quiet. "Your granddaughter has a chronic illness. You took money from her medical fund. Your daughter struck that little girl. And your solution?" He looked around the table. "Is for everyone to calm down?" No one answered. Because there wasn't an answer. Kinsley stepped closer to him. "You don't understand." "No." He nodded slowly. "I finally do. You told me your parents wanted to help." "They did." "You told me they offered the money." "They did." "You never told me whose money." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "You knew." He wasn't asking anymore. "You knew exactly where it came from." Tears streamed down her face. "I didn't think..." "No," he interrupted. "I don't think you did." My father finally stood. "Holt, I'll pay every penny back." Holt looked at him. "With what?" "I'll figure it out." "I don't care." "It isn't my money." He turned toward me. "It belongs to Renly." I hadn't expected that. For the first time since the wedding, someone besides me had actually said her name. "Not the child. Not your daughter. Renly. A little girl. A person. Not an inconvenience." Kinsley suddenly turned toward me. "I'll pay you back." I looked at her. "When?" "As soon as we can." "You've been saying that for months." "I mean it." "So did you mean it when you promised to protect your flower girl?" She flinched. I continued. "Did you mean it when you hugged her and called her your favorite niece?" Silence. Or were those lies too? Her shoulders collapsed. I was stressed. There it is again. I leaned forward. "Do you know what stress looked like for me?" My 7-year-old lying inside an MRI machine. My daughter crying because she couldn't close her hands. Waiting outside hospital rooms praying doctors had good news. That's stress. I looked directly into her eyes. Planning centerpieces isn't. Nobody spoke. Finally, my mother whispered, "We never wanted to hurt Renly." I answered without hesitation. "But you did. It wasn't intentional. Intent doesn't erase consequences." She started crying again. "I thought..." She swallowed hard. "I thought we'd replace it before you ever noticed." There it was. Again. The same sentence. The same belief. That because I was busy keeping my daughter alive, I wouldn't notice my family quietly taking from us. I reached into the folder one final time. There are 2 more copies. Everyone looked at me. One is staying with me. The second, I placed it back into the folder, is for my attorney. The room froze. My mother stopped crying. "What?" "I'm documenting everything." "Winfred?" My father's face turned pale. "You wouldn't..." "I already have." "You'd take us to court?" "If necessary." Kinsley stared at me as if I'd become someone else. "You'd sue your own family?" I met her eyes. "You stopped acting like my family a long time ago." Holt slowly exhaled. Then he said something none of us expected. "If she files..." He looked at Kinsley. "I'll testify." Everyone stared at him. "What?" Kinsley's voice cracked. "I'll tell the truth." "You can't." "I can." "Holt, I watched you blame a sick little girl. I watched you refuse to apologize. And now I've learned you accepted money stolen from her." His voice broke. "I don't know who you are." Kinsley collapsed into a chair. For the first time since I'd known her, she stopped defending herself. She simply cried. Real tears, not dramatic ones, not performative, just broken. Quiet. I ruined everything. No one disagreed. I stood and picked up my folder. I didn't come here for revenge. I looked at each of them. I came here because none of you seemed to understand what you'd actually done. You didn't steal from me. You stole security from a little girl who already fights every single day just to feel normal. I paused, and that's something I don't know if I'll ever forgive. As I reached the front door, my father followed me outside. "Winfred." I stopped. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. "I failed you." The word surprised me. He had never apologized for anything before. "I failed Renly too." I nodded. "Yes? I don't expect forgiveness." "You shouldn't." His eyes filled with tears. "What can I do?" I thought about it for a long moment. Then I answered honestly. "Pay every dollar back. With interest. And don't contact my daughter until she decides she wants to see you." He closed his eyes. "I understand. I hope you do." Because for the first time, his choices had consequences. Real ones. I got into my car. As I drove away, I looked once in the rearview mirror. My father was still standing in the driveway, alone, watching me leave, just as he'd watched me walk away from the vineyard a week earlier. The difference was, this time, he finally understood why. People always imagine that moments like these end with dramatic confrontations. They don't. Most endings happen quietly, one ordinary day at a time. 6 months passed. Life became peaceful. Not easy. Renly's illness was still part of our lives. There were still doctor's appointments, still medication, still days when fatigue stole an afternoon from her. But something had changed. She smiled more. She laughed without constantly looking over her shoulder. And she never again asked if someone was angry with her for being sick. That alone made every difficult decision worth it. 3 weeks after the meeting at my parents' house, the first cashier's check arrived. $8,000. A second envelope followed the next day. $400. Then another. Interest. No note. No explanation. Just payments. My attorney reviewed everything before I deposited a single check. Only after he confirmed the money cleared did I transfer every dollar back into Renly's medical account. When the balance finally matched what it had been before the theft, I cried. Not because of the money, because the promise I'd made to my daughter had finally been restored. Her future belonged to her again. Holt filed for legal separation less than 2 months after our meeting. I didn't celebrate. Divorce is painful, even when it's necessary. A few weeks later, he called. "I wanted you to know something." "I'm listening." I testified exactly the way I promised. "I know. I also paid half of what Kinsley still owed your parents." That surprised me. "You didn't have to." I know. But I couldn't live with benefiting from that money. There was a long pause. Then he asked quietly, "How's Renly?" "She's doing well." "I'm glad." He hesitated. "Tell her—" His voice caught. "I tell her I'm sorry." "I will." And I did. Renly simply nodded. "I think Uncle Holt is nice. He made a mistake. But he fixed it." Children often understand redemption better than adults do. My parents respected the boundary. At first, I assumed it was because my attorney had sent formal letters instructing them not to contact Renly directly. Later, I realized it was something else. Shame. The first birthday they missed was difficult. My mother mailed a present. I returned it unopened, not to punish her, but because gifts aren't apologies. 3 months later, a handwritten letter arrived. No excuses, no blaming stress, no mention of family reputation. Just 6 pages, every one of them saying some version of the same sentence. I chose the wrong child. I read it twice, then placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. She was beginning to understand that. One Saturday afternoon, Renly and I were planting flowers outside the house. She looked up suddenly. "Mom?" "Yeah? Can I ask you something?" "Always. Are Grandma and Grandpa bad people?" Children ask impossible questions so simply. I set down my gardening gloves. "No. They made very bad choices." "What's the difference?" I smiled sadly. "Bad people don't usually feel sorry. People who make bad choices still have a chance to become better." She thought about that for a while. "Will they?" "I don't know. I hope so." She nodded. "I hope so too." Then she went back to planting purple daisies. Just like that, children are remarkable. They carry pain, but they also carry hope. Several weeks later, my father asked if we could meet. Alone, at a small coffee shop halfway across town. He looked thinner. His hair seemed grayer. "I don't expect anything today." He folded his hands. "I just wanted to tell you something face to face." I waited. "I spent your whole life believing keeping peace was the same as doing what was right." He swallowed hard. "I was wrong." "I know." I protected Kinsley. "I know. And in doing that," his voice broke, "I failed both my daughters." That was the first honest thing I'd heard him say in years. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask to see Renly. He simply stood when the conversation ended. "I'll keep earning back what I can." I nodded. "That's all you can do." A year after the wedding, Renly had another appointment with her specialist. This time, the doctor smiled before saying a word. "I've got good news. Every parent knows that feeling, the moment your heart stops waiting. Her disease is in remission." I covered my mouth. Renly looked confused. "What does that mean?" The doctor smiled. "It means you're doing wonderfully." She jumped off the examination table. "Mom." She threw herself into my arms. "We did it!" "No," I whispered through tears. "You did." That evening we celebrated with pizza, chocolate cake, and far too much ice cream. As the sun disappeared behind the trees, Renly climbed onto the porch swing beside me. "Mom?" "Yeah? Remember the wedding?" "I do. I'm not sad about it anymore." I looked at her. "Really?" She nodded. "Because now I know something." "What's that?" She smiled the kind of smile only children can manage. "The people who really love you." She slipped her hand into mine. "Don't make you earn it." I kissed the top of her head. "No, sweetheart. They never do." And in that moment, I realized something. The greatest inheritance we leave our children isn't money. It isn't houses. It isn't family traditions. It's teaching them that love never asks them to accept cruelty just to belong. That lesson was worth more than every dollar that had ever been stolen.